Michael, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Sorry about that. That was all fun and games, really. Anyway, it's a nice icebreaker. Should we put it that way?
Absolutely, Frida.
Well, congratulations on the film and congratulations on your performance as well. Now, Wild Indians, the debut feature from Lyle Corwin Jr., isn't it? And you've got a career that actually goes back to the 90s. So I wondered how much you felt you were taking a bit of a chance on a first-time director.
I didn't feel like it was a risk, to be quite honest with you. The assuredness of his script told me that this is an incredibly talented filmmaker, an incredibly gifted storyteller. So I never actually felt for a moment that this was a risk in terms of how it might turn out. I knew from the moment I read the script that it's a project that I had to do. And I think I've mentioned this in some other interviews, but I've been waiting my entire career for projects like this.
So what was so special about the script? What convinced you?
Well, certainly the writing, its complexity and sophistication was something that I really appreciated. But I loved that Lyle had, in a way, hijacked a genre that we don't access very often, crime thriller, and reimagined it to tell a story of how Indigenous men hold their pain and how they deal with that. And so, to me, it was wonderfully subversive to take a genre and use it to examine Indigenous experience, historical trauma, in ways that I'd never seen before.
And what was it about your character, Makwa, or Michael, that interested you as well? Because, I mean, he's a character with a real darkness underneath and a real violence simmering underneath as well.
Yeah, he certainly is. I think one of the other reasons that I was really attracted to Lyle's story and the script is that the Indigenous worldview allowed for Michael, Makwa, to be placed as the antagonist, the protagonist and antagonist in a way, of a world that we did not need to use a white character against which we might be pitted. We internalized the entire drama. The beautiful performance by Chaske allowed this incredible balance to take place inside the narrative. And it allowed me to lean in to the violence, the self-loathing, the near sociopathic tendencies of the Michael character. And I was able to trust that as I leaned into this performance, within the world that Lyle was creating, there would be balances. So I was unafraid that the portrait would be misconstrued by audiences.
And I gather you lost some weight for the role as well, and presumably did a bit of physical training. I wondered why you felt you needed to do that and what it added to your performance.
I felt I had to transform to play Michael. Certainly I'm in my 50s, and as everyone knows, you gain weight and you become thicker as you get older. And I knew that Michael is scripted as being a younger man, early 40s. So I felt it was essential that I look like a younger man. So I lost 35 pounds to play him. There were scenes written into the script in which he was working out. He worked out a lot. In the end, we only used the golf sequence because of COVID. We couldn't film inside gyms. But in Lyle's narrative, Michael is obsessed with appearance, And he had crafted this sort of, ultra fit, hyper masculine, persona. And I felt it was essential for me to immerse myself in the kind of lifestyle that he, adopted for himself. So I became obsessed with working out and eating, and it allowed me access to a kind of displacement in a way, to that which is going on around me. Like, for example, someone would be eating something quite delicious and caloric next to me, and I'd be like, no, I don't want that. I can't have that. And it created this sort of kind of violent displacement from the things that he wants and the things that he allows himself to do. That allowed me very much to connect with his propensity towards violence, and how he had to rein it in constantly. In nearly every scene, there was an impulse towards violence, and how he had to curb that, like the way I was curbing my hunger.
Yeah. So it's a film with a comparatively small cast. I'm assuming it wasn't a very long shoot. And you've got a very powerful story, and you've talked about the intensity of the role. So how do you come down from such an emotional high once you finish shooting?
Well, we only had 17 days to make this project, which is extraordinary, very, very short. I think Lyle was relying on my experience, Chaske's experience. We're both seasoned actors. I think he knew that with such a tight shooting schedule, that we had very little room, first of all, for improvisation, for warming ourselves up. When we arrived on set, we were ready to shoot. And Lyle and Eli, our cinematographer, they were brutally efficient. They really knew what they wanted. And I never felt rushed, never once. I felt like we always had enough takes, but to drop ourselves completely and so suddenly into these characters' lives was jarring. And afterward, we enjoyed our process. We enjoyed what we were doing, and the yell cut, and we would take big breaths and try to relax. We laughed, enjoyed ourselves, but really the effect of diving into that character stayed with me for some time afterwards. I've mentioned in other interviews, and I'll reiterate it, that I remain haunted by that experience.
Have you ever had that happen before?
No. There's never been a character in my life that had this level of self-loathing, that he had internalized racism so completely that it had disrupted his emotional development, how he reacted to intimacy, how he replaced intimacy with violence and sexual violence. All these things were really disturbing traits. But at the same time, I knew that there were layers of trauma that this young man had experienced, and these layers became really in lieu of a personality. And so I knew that at the soul, at the core level, this was a terribly pained human being, struggling to find a way to move forward. And I think the arc of him was really challenging to hold on to his humanity, the beautiful soul that we sort of saw in Phoenix's performance as the young Makwa. But it's something that Lyle helped me to find.
Sounds a terrible cliche to say this, but do you think this was actually the role that you were born to play?
I hope so. I think so. What I loved about Makwa was that he was so brilliant. I think I'm a smart guy, but I loved how brilliant he was. That his ambition was so naked, brutally honest about things, and he was powerful. I think it's rare to find a character with these sorts of flaws also be so powerful. And it relates to other characters I've been playing, and that I won't play a disempowered or an indigenous character without agency. To me, that's a very tired trope. But again, it was extraordinary to sort of dive into that world.
So how difficult has it been for you to, in essence, leave him behind and move on to your next role or roles?
It was almost immediately after I finished filming the final scenes of Wild Indian, which were delayed because of the pandemic. I started work on Rutherford Falls and the character of Terry Thomas, who is literally like on the other side, like the other side of the moon, like Makwa's on the dark side of the moon and Terry's on the other. And
which is probably a good thing under the circumstances. It's really a complete change.
It really helped me because part of Rutherford Falls is experiencing our joy as Indigenous people, to allow ourselves to perform inside the joy that we know in our own lives. So to me, it was a wonderful part of the healing of my work as an actor to play Terry. But interestingly enough, Terry and Makwa have lots of similarities. They're both powerful. They're both ambitious. How one uses those faculties, how one character uses those faculties is the polar opposite of the other. But in a way, I found some similarities, surprising ones.
And I gather you're also in the film version of Stephen King's Firestarter. Have you actually finished filming that yet, or has that been delayed as well?
No, that was delayed originally because of the pandemic, but we filmed it this past summer. Okay. Here in Canada, and Blumhouse are marvelous storytellers. What I love about our remake is that the character of Rainbird is beautifully realized in Scott Teems's script. I applaud the bravery of his writing and the Blumhouse reconception of that character for the 21st century. He's an expansive, sophisticated villain. It was such a delight to play him.
Because you've actually been in quite a few horror movies or horror series. You've tangled with a few zombies along the way, I know. Would you call yourself a horror movie fan, or would you actually run a mile from actually watching a horror movie?
I very much enjoy horror films. So to me, being part of that genre is really, really exciting. It's the kind of films I enjoy watching, and for me, and for me to be a participant is a real delight.
Final question. I wondered who you thought is actually the Wild Indian of the title. I mean, is it actually Makwa and Michael, or is it Ted-O, or is it both of you?
That's a lovely question. I think actually that the title references the notion of who we are to, I think, non-Indigenous audiences. That if you think about the history of those two words together, I think it asks you to think about these sort of misplaced tropes of savagery and lack of sophistication and primitivism that never were connected to our cultures and our history. And I love the title. I love that this film is titled that way, because it presents actually the very opposite of what that word and what that idea represents. For example, Ted-O is literally the opposite of that. He's such a contained and gentle soul, trapped in a brutal facade. And Makwa Michael is a beautiful, like the way they photographed me. I was meant to, sit in the place of like a movie star frame. Again, the opposite of a so-called primitive portrait. So I think the title asks the audience to reconceive the characters, the native characters that they're watching, through a very old lens. But at the same time, Lyle is able to examine that history of violence, the notion of a savage interior, and a brutally violent history in completely new ways. So I love our title.
Michael, it's been lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And well, the film's coming out soon, so hopefully lots of people will get to see it as well.
I hope so. It's been such a wonderful conversation. Thank you very much, Frida.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.